All right, welcome everyone. As I mentioned, my name is Amy Smith. I'm the Director of Certifications and Advocacy at the ANA and the BCNS. So today we are discussing Florida licensing. And so we've invited anyone who is already licensed or thinking about getting licensed in Florida to join us to go through the process. So I am joined today by Alana and Megan, who both volunteer at the ANA. So I'm going to do a little introduction for them and then the agenda. Alana is a certified nutrition specialist, licensed nutritionist, mentor, thought leader, business and marketing expert, and entrepreneur. Passionate about advocacy and the growth of the nutrition profession, she supports the ANA advocacy team as the state mentor program advisor.
I'm listening. I'm just listening to this as well.
Mentor for New York. She's an advisor for this year's summit planning and is an ACNPE task member. She's also the co-founder of Nutrition Collaborative, which is an online supervised practice experience program for CNS candidates and provides one-on-one business coaching to nutrition professionals. She also runs a private nutrition practice specializing in complex related conditions, environmentally acquired conditions, autoimmune allergies and sensitivities, as well as GI dysfunction, longevity, and immune rejuvenation. And we are also joined by Megan Plaka, who has been a CNS since 2019 and is licensed as an LDN in Pennsylvania and Florida. She is currently employed at a functional medicine practice where she provides prevention and root cause resolution, MNT, to patients at nutritional risk based on diagnosis and clinical needs. She also serves on their continuing education committee, where she helps to develop content for the learning needs and continuing education of the clinical nutrition team. Megan is an ANA volunteer state mentor for Florida. She provides guidance to CNSs and CNS candidates who are seeking licensure in the state. In her free time, she can be found weightlifting at the gym and spending time with her husband, son, daughter, and green-eyed cat. So let's welcome them both. And I would just like to share how much I appreciate both of their work in Florida, and Alana helps us in several of the different states. So they're both volunteering their time to help you. So please, kind of give them a virtual round of applause. So today we're going to go through the actual application process in Florida. So Alana's going to walk you through what the application actually looks like. We're going to review the Florida SPE requirements, which includes clinical nutrition and community nutrition. And then Megan's going to go through the CE guidelines, and we've got some resources for you. And then we will have a discussion and Q&A at the end. Again, like I mentioned, that will not be recorded, but if anyone has questions about the process, also if you're licensed in Florida, we would love to hear your experience during that time as well. So I'm going to turn it over to Alana, who's going to walk us through the application process.
Thank you, Amy. Can you hit the slide? There we go. Okay.
I actually think it's Megan first. That was
yes,
my mistake. So Megan's going to talk us through the first couple of slides.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, hello, everyone. I am Megan Plaka. You might know me as Megan Anthony on social media. Anthony is my middle name, so it's all the same person. So thank you for joining our town hall this evening. Florida is definitely a very exciting state to be licensed in. So as Amy mentioned, I mentor CNSs and CNS candidates on the Florida licensing process. And I've been doing that for the past 2 years now. And I'm a volunteer, so I'm not an employee of the ANA. I'm not giving legal advice, but I'm certainly here to support you in the best way that I can. And while I cannot promise to know every single thing about Florida licensure, I certainly have learned a great deal over the past 2 years with my experience in mentoring CNSs, observing the quarterly Florida Council meetings, and also with my own personal experience as being licensed in Florida. So I'm really happy to share that experience with you all. And I'm hoping that our presentation tonight will help to make the Florida licensing process a little less confusing and give you the confidence with your own application. Or if you're a supervisor, if there's any supervisors on our call tonight, that hopefully you'll also get your questions answered as well. And also I wanted to say that I do not live in Florida. I am located in New Jersey, but I have a Florida license because I do have clients there. And that brings us to this first slide that you're looking at right now. So the first thing that we want to establish is that to perform nutrition counseling or practice medical nutrition therapy for clients who live in Florida, it is required to have a Florida license as an LDN. So as you're probably already aware, that nutrition law varies from state to state. And as nutrition providers, we must follow the law in the state in which the client resides. So regardless of whether you live in Florida or not, if you plan on providing nutrition counseling to clients who reside in Florida, you must obtain that LDN license in Florida. Now, it is okay if you're actively in an SPE or supervised practice experience program. If you're being supervised, then it's totally okay to practice nutrition because you're under supervision, and your SPE supervisor should be able to guide you on that. But once you've completed your SPE and you are no longer under supervision, then you must wait until you obtain a Florida license before you take on any clients who live in Florida. Okay. Next slide, please. Thank you. Okay, so let's talk about, now that we know that we need the license, let's talk about the different methods for applying. So this can be a little bit confusing. So I'm going to explain the different methods and hopefully you'll become much clearer on that as I go through them. So on the left, there's 4 different methods in Florida to apply. So when you're approaching your application, you'll have these choices to make. So the one on the left is by examination. And that's really a method that's really for applicants who received their education or experience or credentialing outside of the United States. So I'm really not going to speak much to this because I don't know much about it, and I don't really think I don't know if it applies to anyone on this call, but that's the method for people from outside of the United States who maybe are coming to Florida and now want to see clients there, and they need to be evaluated as if they're, to see if their education and experience is appropriate for them, or aligned with nutrition law in Florida. The second one you see, the second one with the big green check mark on the bottom, that is the method called examination with waiver. That is the one that's for CNS. And this is the one that we strongly recommend using at this time. I just have the fees posted there. I didn't post them for the other options. The fees are $165 as of now. And this is the mode, the method to go if you're a CNS and applying. The third one you see from over on the right to that is endorsement of an RD status. So this would be if you're an RD. I don't think there's any RDs on the call, but for RDs, they are automatically endorsed with their application. And I realize, I just wanted to say a quick note about this. I realize that can be disappointing and frustrating as a CNS to not automatically be endorsed as well, but this is the current nutrition law in Florida. And hopefully, someday maybe that will change, but for now, for our purposes, like right here and now, we have to work within those requirements of the law when preparing your application, and we're here to support you, to set you up for success to do that. And now the one on the far right, that method is called endorsement of licensure in another state. And that is a method where you would be applying using a license that you already have in another state. There's been a lot of confusion about this method as well. This is still a legitimate method to use. However, we strongly recommend not selecting this method at this time and using the examination with waiver with the green check on it. So I also want to make it clear that many CNSs, including myself, have been licensed in Florida through this endorsement through another state method. I have a Pennsylvania license. That's what I used at the time a few years ago. There's been many CNSs who have a Maryland license, and there's other states as well. And you also may have colleagues or know others who did become licensed in Florida this way. But so far in 2023, in this year, CNSs who have applied through this method are not being approved. So we've concluded, for the time being at least, that Florida has not been consistent with their decision making with this method. So really, to save you time, you might want to avoid this method. And because what would happen is, if you're denied, then you're given, of course, the option to reapply using this examination with waiver, the method with the green check. But that's just going to delay you, because you're going to have to wait another 3 months to sit on the next board meeting with the Florida Council, and that will delay you taking on clients. So it might have been a convenient option in the past, but right now it doesn't seem to be the way to go. Things have evolved in Florida, and we are, watching that and keeping our eye on that. And now I'm turning things over to Alana. She's going to break down the whole application, the actual application for you.
Thank you so much, Megan. And it's great to see so many familiar faces here tonight. And we hope that you'll find this informative and make the application process go a lot smoother. And like Megan had said, and sort of to piggyback on there, if you're not aware, Florida only, they meet 4 times a year. So February, May, August, and November. And that's when they review all the applicants. And so if you're not accepted, your application does not meet their requirements at that time, you would have to then change up your application and reapply for, or edit it to then sit before them the next meeting. So it is really important from a time perspective that you're able to apply properly so that you can, expedite the process. So they have a lovely online system. It's called the MQA online system. And what you would do is you would go up to their main website, which the link is here. And then you would go in and you would create a new profile for yourself. And then from there, you're going to then log in to your profile to see the status with your last name, your social security number, and your date of birth. Next slide. And then this is what it looks like. So from here, you're able to upload new documents, see a status of what they've already received. And then keep in mind that it does look like you can upload a transcript, but really your transcript actually needs to be sent to them from the clearinghouse or from the school directly. And it can be sent via email or US mail. And they have that information on their main information page. But you can upload your other documentation. So it's going to be your 900 hours forms and your application and then your CNS certificate actually you can either upload it there or you can have it come from the BCNS directly. Next slide. So this is what the application looks like. It's a downloadable PDF that you fill out. And I know it's sort of small to see everything, but basically you are going to, I just need to make this a little bit bigger for myself here. You are going to, check off exam with waiver. And then, you're going to fill all of this out. And keep in mind that there are certain personal information that they're going to ask for. So you're going to want to make sure to look over this application and make sure you're, meeting all of the requirements as you're preparing to to submit it. Next slide, please. So, so this is background. So they are going to ask about your background history. So other names, if you hold any temporary permits or licenses in other states, right? And this is where if you have been denied or you have a license that has inactive, like you're going to still want to include all of that because they will do a check. So, you know, be sure to be thorough because any things that they find that are inaccurate, you know, they will question you. So it's much better just to be open and forward, and you can have the opportunity to speak to things than it is for them to come up with it and put you on the spot. And then let's see here. You've got this also disaster services. So that's something else to make sure you understand what you're checking off. Next slide. Okay. And then this starts to get into your SPE. So they require 900 hours and your and talking about your education. So this is where you're going to, you know, make sure you're filling this out in full. Okay, next slide. Okay, and then, you know, this is also important, the discipline history, right? Have you ever had a license revoked or suspended or acted against? So you want to include that. And again, they, you know, will give you an option to speak to it. So don't be afraid that you've got some sort of history and that's just going to be an all or nothing kind of response. And then they also are going to ask about your criminal history. So again, you need to be able to speak to that. You know, I have sat in on sessions where there were people that have had questionable backgrounds and they were able to still get licensed. So, you know, it's just a matter of providing a self-explanation and, you know, answering questions and working through and showing how you've overcome what it was that may be in question. So just be honest and transparent. That's the key that we want to take away with this. Next slide. Okay, so this is page 1 of the 900 hours your supervisor needs to fill out, right? So there's this verification form with all these details. And so you're going to send this off to each of your supervisors, if you have multiple supervisors, and they're going to fill these out and get it back to you. And you're going to provide all of them together with your application. So this is not something that your supervisor submits for you on your behalf. Next slide. Thank you. Okay, so this is another section for your supervisor. And then they're going to go into this area here, the clinical nutrition practice experience. So they're going to ask you to, you know, to show the areas of your practice and break it down by hours, how you've met these different categories. And you don't have to meet all of them. You just have to show that you've met, you know, enough of them, right? So, and they're only looking for 200 hours of this. Next slide. And then you have the other section, 200 hours of community nutrition. And we're going to get into that more specifically, but you will need to break that down. And then your supervisor signs, you know, the statement, and that is the end of the 3 pages of the supervisor verification. Next slide. And now I'm going to turn this over to Amy.
Great. So one of the biggest questions that we get is about community nutrition. So the BCNS does not require community nutrition. So that's where a lot of the confusion comes in, is that those that weren't aware of the requirement before applying for licensure in Florida often don't know that this is required by the state. So again, this is their requirement, not the BCNS. So they're requiring 200 hours of community nutrition, and it needs to be acquired in a community or public health program or HMO. And they're looking for examples of community nutrition practice experience that fit within these 7 categories. So screening and assessment of nutritional status of the population or community group, provision of nutritional care for people of diverse cultures and religions across lifespan, development, evaluation, or implementation of community-based health promotion programs, nutrition surveillance and monitoring of the population or community group, general assessment, which might include blood pressure, vital signs, lab work, development and review of educational materials for a target population, and then finally development of food and nutrition policy for the population or community group. So some of the tips that we want to offer on this section, it's a good idea to go back and listen to the recordings from the past couple meetings and see what other CNSs are doing when they're submitting this section. And really from our experience and speaking with some of the supervisors who have overseen candidates who've gotten licensed, you really want to go above and beyond on the paperwork. So don't just complete the table. Give them some examples of what you're doing. We have seen people add a document or a PowerPoint that really describes the community work. But just saying I did community work for 200 hours is not going to be sufficient. Some of the examples that we've seen that have been approved are working at a WIC clinic, working with senior groups, working at a food bank or a community farm. We've seen examples of people who have worked at a primary care physician's clinic with diverse cultures and religions across the lifespan. And that candidate was very specific in documenting out how that met the community hours, even though they were working with those clients one-on-one. Work with underserved groups and work at community gardens or farms, which I mentioned at the food banks. So you'll want to make sure that you are very clear what the 200 hours were consisting of. And like I said, really go above and beyond on that documentation if you can. And we can talk a little bit more about the community hours during the Q&A too. So I'm going to turn it back over to Megan. She's going to talk about continuing education before we start taking any questions.
Okay, thank you, Amy. Okay, so in Florida, the CE requirements go per biennium, so every 2 years. And 30 hours are required in that 2-year span. 28 of them could be general CE topics, and 2 hours must be related to medical errors prevention. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. There's actual like small little CE courses that you can take related to medical errors. So if you have your license and it's your first time renewing, you do the 30 hours, and that includes 2 hours of the medical errors. And for that first time renewal, you also have to do 3 hours of an HIV/AIDS type CE, which is also something that you can purchase through CE Broker. I'll talk about CE Broker in a moment. So those would be the 2 required courses, and then everything else could be like, more general topics. And that's if you're in the first year of the biennium. So it depends on what year that you're being licensed in. So if it's in the first half of the biennium, you would be doing the full 30 hours plus the medical errors and the HIV/AIDS. And then if you're licensed in the second year of that biennium, you do not have to do the regular CE requirements, but you still need to do the medical errors and the HIV/AIDS. Next slide, please. So this is a list of board rule approved Florida CE providers. I won't read them all to you, but the 4th one down, we have highlighted in yellow. So that is the courses approved by any board within the Division of Medical Quality Assurance, which relates to maintaining skills necessary for the safe and competent practice of dietetics and nutrition services. We highlighted that because that's where the BCNS would fall under. So in my experience, because I have already renewed earlier, I think it was earlier this past year. In my experience, the BCNS falls under this category. I used almost all BCNS approved type CE coursework and credits. And even though it's not named specifically, because this refers to like a collection of different boards. The BCNS falls under that umbrella. You'll see further down the last entry on this slide, any course offered by the Commission on Dietetics Registration. So the CDR is specifically named on here, but the BCNS is not, and this has caused some confusion as well. When you're entering in your continuing education credits, this is where the BCNS type courses would fall under. Next slide, please. These are some other methods for obtaining Florida CE hours. I'm not really going to speak much about these because I don't have any experience with them, and I don't think that they're like the typical way of going about obtaining CEs, but they are listed on the Florida website. And please note that the BCNS does not accept everything on this list towards CNS recertification. So sometimes there's overlap, but sometimes things do not. Next slide, please. So I mentioned a few moments ago CE Broker. So that is the online tracking system that Florida uses for you to keep track of your CE hours that pertain to your Florida license. And we'll provide the link for that in a future slide here. But the tracking system, you can create a free account. That's what I use. That provides all the necessary tools to comply with your reporting requirements. There is a paid version. It's called the professional account. I don't have experience with that. From what I understand, it just offers more expanded tracking tools. But I personally have used the free account, and it works very well. It's very user-friendly. And this is where not only you track your hours, but the Florida Council is viewing that as well. So that's where they're approving your license renewal. Next slide, please. So some tips for tracking in the CE Broker when you get to that point. So as I mentioned before, the BCNS falls under that any board within the division of the MQA. So when you're prompted with a series of questions as you enter in each continuing education credit or course that you've done, when you're asked how is the CE provider accredited, you would be selecting this option, any board within the division of MQA. If it's something, if you took some type of course that was CDR approved, then there's an actual option that spells that out, but you won't see anything. You will not see the BCNS listed specifically, but in my experience, it would fall under the one on top that we have in bold. You can purchase CE courses within CE Broker if you want to. That's where you can. I purchased the medical errors one. It was very affordable. I think it was like $15 or $20. And I did the HIV/AIDS one in there as well. It was very easy. I think some people have questioned in the past whether they need to do all separate CEs through the CE Broker. That is not necessary. I use all BCNS approved, mostly all BCNS approved courses. I did have one CDR one that I needed for work, but it's not necessary to purchase separate ones. So you can, use them all for Florida. Next slide. And this slide just features some resources, so clickable links, and I believe that we'll have these slides posted somewhere for future access. So the first one refers to our Florida guidance document. That is something that if you've ever emailed me about inquiring about obtaining a license in Florida, I probably sent you this document. It's really, really helpful. It has all the information. It spells out all the information in there that you'll need to know. So that's a really good document to read over. There's a link here takes you to the Florida website for the agenda and the minutes. As Amy mentioned earlier, we strongly recommend reading through the minutes and looking over what's happened in past council meetings, because that will help you feel more comfortable with the process when it's your turn to go up in front of the council. The link to the CE broker is here. And as always, you can always reach out to me for any kind of support. My email is somewhere in this slide presentation. Yeah, there it is.
Thank you, Megan. And we'll put all the links in the chat too here while we have a few minutes. Okay, so I'm going to stop recording and we can